Hey guys, let's talk about this week's episode of The Originals. And I really liked this episode. There were a lot of different storylines going on that I really enjoyed, starting with Davina and Marcel. Now, we all know that Davina pretty much wants nothing to do with Marcel. And Marcel is trying to reconnect with her and have her believe that he doesn't want to hurt her. And they had some really touching scenes in this episode, and I really enjoyed it. What I really liked about leading up to this moment was we've seen Marcel pretty much treat Davina as like a sister, like a little sister to her, for him. And that really carried into this episode. So we know that, she has felt betrayed by Marcel, and she pretty much thought that he was just going to use her so that he could then have her turn and finish this harvest. And that's not really what was going on in Marcel's mind. He didn't want her to leave so that she would get hurt. But unfortunately, she felt that that wasn't true. And in this episode, they had a really great scene with her and him. And you could just tell that he really cared about her and cares about her. And, he had flashbacks to the moment when they were going to kill her for the harvest, and he saved her life. And in that moment, he pulls the IV that's in her arm and out, and he takes her away, and he just wants to protect her. And I really enjoyed all the scenes that they had together. And then ultimately at the end, when she's like choking on the water because it looks like they're about to die with this I guess the effect of all the different powers that are coming into play now, because the three other girls are dead, and she makes the fourth for the harvest and all this kind of stuff. So they were having wind and water and fire and all this craziness, and they had a bit of an earthquake, and so all this craziness was happening. And she knows that if she doesn't go along with this plan, she's gonna die anyway. So she pretty much tells Marcel, I'm fine with it. I'm okay. Just sacrifice me, and hopefully, I come back to life, which is what is supposed to happen at the end of the harvest. And Sophie Devereaux was in this episode, and she pretty much told everybody what's going to happen if we don't complete the harvest. And so pretty much everybody is on board, and the plan is to have Davina become the sacrifice and complete the harvest. And then they tried to dig up, or she did dig up Celeste, who was one of the witches that Elijah was in love with many years ago, and he had buried her body with her wishes where nobody would find it. And then, of course, in last week's episode, Haley found out, or went through Elijah's journals and told Sophie where she was buried, and now she has her remains. And so, like, a whole complicated story later, the sacrifice doesn't work, and everybody is, pretty upset with the fact that, all this was for nothing. And so, of course, Marcel is very upset that now he's lost Davina, and, he feels betrayed by all of them: Elijah, Rebecca, Marcel, as well as Sophie. So he's pretty upset about it. And then this leads to this really great scene between him and Klaus, where Klaus, and him have this moment where he says, listen, I understand your pain. This is how I felt after I left New Orleans, and I realized that I left you behind, and you were like my best friend, my brother, and I left you, and I understand the pain because I thought you were dead. And they have this really great moment. And what the show has done up to this point, they've really shown, the animosity that these two have together, them coming back together, whether it was real or not. But you can tell that they have this bond, and that they definitely work better as allies than they do as enemies. And so in that scene when they hugged, and Marcel was crying, it just was really a great moment. I thought it was a really great scene between the two of them. You all know that I'm not a huge Klaus fan, and they have to do a lot for me to want to get back into Klaus's good books, because I just think that Klaus does everything bad. He just like he reacts, and he makes problems way worse than they need to be. And had he not killed Tim in last week's episode, Davina wouldn't have been so upset, and a lot of this wouldn't have happened. So I think that that moment between Marcel and Klaus was very powerful, and I think they did a really great job with that scene. Another scene that I really enjoyed was when Haley told Elijah that she had gone through his diaries, and she told Sophie where Celeste was buried. And you could just see the hurt on Elijah's face and how devastated he was and I really like the way they handled this as well, because it wasn't just like, oh, how could you do that? I can't believe you betrayed me, and he walked off. No, he was like, what you have done is far worse, because now you have broken a promise that I made to Celeste all those years ago, that I would bury her in a place where nobody would ever find her, so that she wouldn't go through any more pain. And now you've taken away that promise that I made to her. And it just was like, it cut so deep within him that it was more than just a betrayal. It was just, he's now broken a promise. And we all know Elijah's character. He's somebody, a man of his word, and he always honors that. So now that choice has been taken away from him, he had no choice. He didn't choose to dig up her body and betray her. It has been taken away. So I thought that was a very powerful scene too. And then of course, when they reconnect towards the end of the episode, Haley makes some great points, which are, I'm not trying to live in the past. I'm trying to live in the present now. And you're here. So she's pretty much saying, choose me over this dead witch that is gone. And so I thought that was a great moment. And then, of course, he pulled her in and they almost had a kiss. And then it didn't happen, and Haley goes off into the night. So, the fact that obviously Elijah still has feelings for Celeste was very interesting. And now, obviously, the big reveal at the end, which is that Celeste is actually alive. And is she now in Sabine's body? Has she been in Sabine's body for the last year? Or is it that with everything that just happened and her getting dug up and being resurrected, that now she's in? Like, I'm a little confused as to how long Celeste has been alive. Were those not her remains? Did somebody else dig her up years ago, like a year ago, and they put somebody else's bones down there? I have no idea. Lots of questions. They've got some explaining to do. But I thought it was obviously a really cool twist at the end. Celeste is not dead. What will this mean? Will she be very angry? Who will she be angry at? Will she be mad at Klaus because Klaus is ultimately the one who drowned her? What? I have so many questions. But again, this was another really good story arc in this episode. And then, of course, we have Rebecca, who I'm really liking right now, because she's not just sitting back and letting everybody tell her what to do. She is planning her own fate. So she is gathering up all of her little minions, and she is trying to line them all up so that when that day comes and she wants to take on Marcel and Klaus and Elijah, she's going to have her own army to do it. And of course, she's still having conversations with Thierry, who's locked up in, that hole in the wall. And he's helping her out. He's the one who actually told her where Marcel would have taken Davina. And so, she's building up her own little group of people, which is going to be very interesting when that day comes. And of course, even Klaus is realizing that he's underestimating his sister and what she's capable of doing. So yeah, Rebecca is definitely, she's like all power to the women right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. So yeah, I mean, the episode wasn't like boom, boom, boom. Like there wasn't like all these big, huge shock and awe, but there were a lot of really great moments within the episode. And there were a lot of great scenes between characters that they have actually spent quite a bit of time developing the relationships with. So I like that. The one thing that kind of confused me though in this episode was, Davina had basically said she was going to die for this cause, for this harvest, whatever. But where was Josh? And in last week's episode, we saw obviously the bond between the two of them. He's her friend. He even was willing to give her information and not tell her that if she had gone forward with this, that he would have died because of it. If she had actually killed Klaus or whatever, he would have died because Klaus is the one who turned him. And he wasn't anywhere in this episode. And it's like, well, wouldn't you think that they would at least give shout, like she would at least say, please tell Josh that, I love him or I care about him and that I've got to go and I've got to do this. Like there was no mention of Josh in this episode, which I thought was a little weird considering he's like her new besties at this point. So come on, show. You got to do a little bit better with that, with the continuity. But outside of that, I really did enjoy this episode. And I even wasn't annoyed by Sophie, because Sophie, in that moment when she's doing the ritual and she's thinking that, now that she's slit Davina's throat, and she's now part of the four women who are supposed to be sort of resurrected with the powers of these old witches that have died, and it doesn't work, and she breaks down in tears. I thought that was a really great moment too, because she had a lot invested in this too. She's trying to save her niece, and when it doesn't work, she's devastated equally, just as Marcella's devastated. So I felt that all the emotions in this episode really worked, and I felt for the characters in this episode. So I thought that they did a really great job there. So will be interesting to see what happens next week. I'm very excited. Much better episode than the week before. And again, I'm really enjoying this show as a separate entity of the Vampire Diaries. So we'll see what happens next week. Leave a comment down below, subscribe, like, all those good juicy things, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye guys.